Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, Greg Carlos.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and thank you for tuning in to MotorWeek podcast number 305. 305 of these things, and I finally get to host one. I am truly honored. John Davis is on a well-deserved vacation. He is on another continent right now. Yeah. If you worked with any of us, you'd also want to be on another continent. But I'll do my best to fill in and moderate this podcast for the next half hour or so. We'll be talking, as usual, 3 cars a day, which we have varying levels of experience with. We'll start with the 2023 Mercedes-Benz EQB, which we had in for a road test, and we all drove for about 2 weeks. We'll also talk about our long-term 2023 Acura Integra, which we've had for a few months now, probably 2 months.
That's the newest edition.
Yeah, so we've driven that quite a bit in the last 2 months. And then finally, we will get to later in the show, which everybody's been talking about, the reveal of the 2024 Toyota Tacoma. And that one we have not driven, but Brian spent some decent time with in Hawaii, and he'll give us all the details on that. And as I had mentioned, we have Brian with us today, Brian Robinson, our two-wheeling reporter. We also have our digital producer, Jessica Ray, and our writer, Alex, possibly Alexander Kellum, depending.
I'm feeling Alex today.
All right, I like Alex. So let's get into it with the 2023 Mercedes-Benz EQB. And if you want to play at home, why don't you pause it right now and try to figure out what exactly this car is. If you think you can figure out Mercedes nomenclature, I'll say it again: Mercedes-Benz EQB.
Well, I say Mercedes-Benz EQB, but is it? I have Brian confirm. Is it Mercedes just EQB?
Yes.
So because it's their sub-brand of the EQ,
right,
it is kind of in the same vein as like Mercedes AMG,
right,
where it's like all together in that hyphenated thing, I guess, technically.
Yes.
If you've unpaused and come back,
that'll help you get on the right track.
If you've come back, the answer is it is Mercedes all-electric version of their GLB, which is their second smallest SUV, denoted by the B. EQ stands for is electrified.
Yes,
if you hear anything EQ
brand,
in a Mercedes, it's electrified. It's a little bit different here, though, because as Jessica's about to tell you, this is not a dedicated EV platform.
Correct. This is unique. I think it's the only one in the U.S. that has EQ in its name, but it's not built on the EQ platform. In Europe, which we were actually supposed to get, and I think the pandemic might have ruined some of Mercedes product stuff. They had the EQC, which was the same sort of situation. It was built on the existing an existing platform that was just like retrofitted to make electrification work. So essentially, this is very different from the other EQ models that we have driven. And I think on the surface, there's a couple things. Like if you look at the exterior, yes, it looks like a GLB that was like EQ-ified, if you want to say that, right? It's kind of got like the smoothed out grille because it's an EV, doesn't need a real grille. It's got the light bar that they use. And then of course it has like more aerodynamic wheels and stuff like that. But it's like very square and like it looks like a GLB.
And I'll say this, and I think, Brian, we probably talked about the GLB when that came out. We both really liked the styling because it kind of looked like, it almost had like mini like G-Wagon vibes to it, and it was very different than like the swoopy, very like now crossover-y style.
Yeah, it's big and blocky and more SUV-like compared to the GLA and GLC.
Yeah. Pick your letter.
Yeah, and it fits in there, and a lot of that was to get the third row in there, which they were able to keep in the EV, which seemed pretty wild.
Yes, and I think we've seen some of the response to like the EQS SUV like design and the just the EQ design language of the other ones, and it's just been less than favorable, honestly.
It's out there.
So I think like this kind of is able to cross the barrier, right? Of like it keeps that GLB styling, gives a little bit of that EQ vibe, the all electric vibe that they want for their design language. So I think in that way, like it's a really good package, like driving wise. I felt like it was a real. It's definitely clear, at least to somebody who has driven, vehicles that are made from the ground up as electric vehicles, that this is a vehicle that was not made from the ground up as an EV. It's just a little less refined in its its braking, its acceleration, like the powertrain is just a little less refined. But I don't mean that in a bad way, because it feels more like a traditional driving experience.
It's more like in a GLB that happens to run on electricity.
Yeah, and part of that too is we were a little late in the game. Originally, when it was launched, there was a 300 and a 350. Our test was the 250 Plus, which is the new base model.
Which is front-wheel drive?
Front-wheel drive.
Single motor.
Yep, it only had
188 horsepower, 284 pound-feet of torque.
It didn't have like some EVs you get in and there's just all that torque. You're like, wow, this is a whole different driving experience. This one didn't have all that power, so that helped it feel more like a traditional ICE engine vehicle.
This reminds me of something you're not necessarily going to show off to your friends or like really tout and say I have a high-end EV. This is more like, I really like EVs. I really
Mercedes.
like the GLB. I like Mercedes, and I just want to drive on electricity.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what this is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think
it's
just like we've gotten so used to things, even from Kia with their EV6, all these dedicated EV platforms that they're really trying to push. Like, look what we can do. And now we just have something like, hey, people like the GLB, we're going to electrify it.
Right. I mean, it's not out there, I think, with styling. It's not out there with its driving experience. And I think that works for it because this is entry level. Like, this is considered entry level. I always thought that the GLB was, it's one of their smaller SUVs and one of the more affordable Mercedes-Benz. So for our tester, like Brian had mentioned, we have the 250 Plus. You're looking at about 245 miles of range. Now, comparative to other things, it's a little slightly on the lower end, but I think still pretty respectable. And even when you go up to the 300, which has 225 horsepower, you're looking at 243 miles. That's only a drop of 2 miles, so that's pretty good. And then the top of the line 350, you get 288 horsepower, is 227 miles. So I mean, of course, you go to the 300 and the 350, you also get 4MATIC all-wheel drive. So you have a dual motor setup if all-wheel drive is what you are looking for. And then, like we had mentioned, it shares so much with the GLB that the interior is pretty much virtually the same. You have the two 10-inch displays with the big turbine vents, as Brian has called them. Is that what they use?
I don't know if I coined that. I'm sure I didn't coin it.
But it's true. But it's the truth.
Everybody knows what you're talking about.
It's these really big vents that I'm not a fan of.
Oh, you're not? Oh, wow.
I mean, maybe they're easy to use. I just think aesthetically, I'm just not the world's biggest fan of them.
Noted.
Because it just clutters it up a little bit. But it's got MBUX, which I think I love MBUX. But we should talk about pricing. So the 250 Plus starts at $53,900. So about $54,000 for a base one of these, and loaded up with the 354 4MATIC, you're looking at just around $62,000.
I feel like that's competitive.
So,
I think it's a very good
Absolutely.
price.
I think more so that Nissan Ariya that we just had in was over 60 for that.
Yes.
So yeah, that's tough to compare.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, I liked it. I think it's a really great EV for somebody who just wants a nice car that runs on electric and doesn't need all the fancy bells and whistles that some of these other EVs provide.
Chime in, Alex.
Yeah, Alex, you got something to say?
No, I think I was away for most of when we had it in, so I have no dogs in this race, but it looks nice. I'll give it that. Yeah,
But that's
Well, so I guess we'll call this their entry-level electric SUV Entry level
point,
EQ, what
Yes.
we're going to
It
call
is
it.
their entry level SUV because EQE SUV is just a little bit bigger, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely bigger. Yeah,
It's midsize. for
and
sure.
it's I guess I don't know. Has the EQE SUV launched yet? I guess officially here in the U.S.
We haven't driven it yet.
Haven't driven
I'm
it.
not sure. I think it's.
I haven't driven it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
either way, if we haven't, we will drive it soon. So from
And
one
E comes after B, so
Yeah, so
this
it has
must
to be
be
bigger.
the entry level.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
From,
Yeah, there we go.
From one entry level to another, we'll go to Alex, who's going to talk about our
Alex is our entry level
Long-term.
employee.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're calling me out.
your words, not mine, Brian.
Okay.
Our
thought that's where you were
2023,
going with that.
our 2023 Acura Integra. It is Acura's entry level, as I said. We've had it for 2 months, and personally, I'm liking it more every time I drive it. Alex, what do you think?
Oh, I love the new Integra. So I did the first drive on it when we first got our hands on it, and then we had it in for testing, and now we have it as a long term. And yeah, when I found out we were having it for a long term, I was very, very pleased because I like it a lot. So for those that don't, well, we've kind of already said what it is, and we've talked about it before, but it's Acura's kind of entry level here. We're talking
Specifically, what do we have, though?
So it's a 4-door liftback. Our exact spec is the A-Spec with Tech package, and that is important because that is the only level where you can get the 6-speed manual, which is in my opinion, one of the few missteps that Acura made with this car. But I'm sure they have. I'm sure they
I
have
would
their
love to hear
reasons.
more about that.
Wow, I didn't think it was all right. I opened the can of worms. Now I got to
have
lay in it,
thoughts, but
right?
I want to hear yours first.
No, it's just a little surprising that it almost feels like a bit of an oxymoron that you have to get the highest trim to get the stick shift, which traditionally would have been, at the entry levels. But that being said, I'm sure they have their reasons. At the A-Spec with Tech, you're getting
Could money
like
be one of those reasons? Could money be one of those reasons?
maybe money does drive a lot of things. I guess pun intended there. Oops. But also it could have just been at this level. That's where you're getting some of the chassis control or the adaptive suspension and stuff. So there may be actual engineering reasons behind it. But that being said, one of the things I like about the Integra the most is even with that 6-speed manual, it's a very livable car in my opinion. It's not it's a stick shift that I think anybody could drive. It's a very light clutch, which I will admit at first I know some people around the office that threw them off, just the way the clutch felt. This
I
was
am one
back.
of those people around the
Oh,
office.
there we go. But I think over time you start to get used to it.
Yes.
At least for me. The only other thing about just speaking to the stick shift experience here that I don't like the trend of electronic parking brakes inside of manual transmission cars. I personally like having just a crank.
You sound like a crank.
Yeah.
Apparently I do.
That's not a trend. That's just the way it is now.
Yeah, well, either way, it's fine. It works. Specifically speaking to ours, I believe when we got ours in, it was at 7,600-ish miles on the clock, and now we're at just over 13. So
Yeah,
we're looking at.
I have some breaking news there.
Oh,
just
here
this
we go.
morning was getting ready to do our next update. We've driven it 5,500 miles so far.
There we go.
5,550.
And hit me with that MPG.
33.6 miles per gallon.
All right.
And I don't want to steal any more of your thunder, Alex, but I do want
Please
to say
do.
that I think we've all probably realized that at highway speeds in 6th gear, this thing revs over 3,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has me
At
looking for
60,
8th gear.
65 miles per hour. And I say that because 33.6 is still a good fuel economy.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so weird when then you take it down to E and you fill it up, and then you only put in 9.9 gallons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very small tank.
Really? Wow.
But you go for quite a bit. On
Yeah,
the
and then
9
it shows
gallons.
400 miles of range. And you're like, wow,
That's pretty good.
yeah.
Back to you, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
It
important
was, it was
stuff.
stewing in my brain, and I just had to get it out.
I'm here for it. My brain's got the DVD logo when it bouncing around. That's all I got. So yeah. So with the A-Spec with Tech Pack, we're also you get all the niceties, right? You got those Gucci leather seats, or not? Are they leather or they're like a?
They're like an
like a-
Alcantara.
Like an Alcantara-esque.
Yeah.
It's not Alcantara. We can't call it
But
that,
it's
but it's a suede.
It's like a suede, I think with leather trim
They're
or
nice-
something
they're
like
nice
that.
seats.
They are
Upscale
good.
fabric.
Yes,
They
upscale.
grip you really well.
I like this.
They get digital instrument panel, you get a head-up display, you get the 9-inch touchscreen. So this is a very livable daily driver. And I want to say the A-Spec with Tech is around 35 and change, starting. So
Again, I feel like a good value there.
competitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said before, the more I drive it, I really like it. And I go back to the long-term Acura TLX we had, the A-Spec, which was the same way for me. Like, I just found myself signing up for it more and more, taking it home for the weekend. And I'll even put up with having to put my kids in the back of this thing, and it's not the easiest thing to do with its shape and its size. But I just really like driving it. It does come with automatic rev matching, which I turned off, which is not as easy as it sounds. You have to go through
it's
all
like
the
through
menus.
a bunch of menus.
But I will say somebody in here turned it back on, and I don't know who it was.
Back to on?
I don't know, because I feel like I had it for a weekend, and I was able to hop in and just continue on. But I don't know.
I was
it's
wondering that
very
myself.
possible.
Yeah,
So if you do come across an Integra with a manual and you want to turn it off, you can do it. And you just really have to dive in through the menus.
Yeah.
Luckily, they're pretty easy to get through, which, it's my issue with the Integra when it came out was like, where's the excitement? Luckily, if you get inside one, it gets a little more exciting.
Yeah, or you'll find out here in the next week or two, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, we'll get to Brian. Brian's been very talkative in this podcast, so we will get to him a little bit later if he can just hang on or hold off there. First, let's get to our lightning round, where panelists have 30 seconds-ish to give their take on a trending automotive topic.
I still gotta find the bell.
We will find the official MotorWeek ding.
We don't need it.
It's somewhere. We are going to discuss, as we're speaking of excitement, AM radio, which gets everybody excited.
Yeah.
Ford has reversed their decision to begin removing AM radio from all of their new vehicles starting in 2024, after Congress recently introduced a bipartisan bill pushing against the growing trend of EVs getting made without the feature. Automakers say that AM signals are subject to interference from EV motors, but legislators worry about the importance of access to AM radios for emergency alert services. So, is AM radio an important feature for cars to have in this 21st century? Who would like to begin?
Don't look at me. I'm going to time out.
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Brian. Jess, how about you?
I mean, as somebody who really, I've hardly ever used AM radio in my entire life. I mean, every now and again you pass one of those highway signs. It's like, tune in to AM channel blah, 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 blah for like traffic alerts or whatever. But it's not something I ever used except for like when my dad was driving and wanted to listen to like a baseball game.
It's
or
always
something.
our dads, yep. Yeah.
Obviously, like I understand its historical importance. And I think it's hard for us to put into perspective living in the digital age. Like, yeah, man, if the entire internet of the world goes down, or like a satellite in space like blows up or something, that we have no connection to each other, right? And that AM radio would be important in something, like when we watch like apocalypse shows and stuff like that. So, I mean, is it important for it having to be in cars, if it proves to be like an engineering issue in the future for EVs and stuff? I don't know about that, but should we all probably keep an AM radio like in our houses or in our cars? Because you can buy them. I think you can buy them, right?
Of course you can buy them.
Right.
Make up your mind, because the bell's about to ring.
Yeah. Anyway,
in 5,
so
4, 3,
that's where I'm at with that.
Ding, ding.
Buy one.
Alex, let's get to you.
right.
Let's hear your thoughts.
I think AM radio, for lack of a better phrase here, is a technology we've effectively mastered at this point. It's a thing that we understand. We use it. So I don't see why not to put it in, unless the signal is somehow interfering with the EV to the point where now the EV is suffering. I say just keep it in. And then if the signal gets kind of, bummed out or whatever, stops working, oh well, that kind of stinks, but it is what it is. I think it's, some people use it for traffic, weather alerts, emergency services. You might as well just put it in. I don't think it's a big deal not to put it in.
Brian?
So being the only person around this table that's actually old enough to get AARP mail, I will say that I do listen to amplitude modulation radio.
I was hoping somebody would drop that knowledge.
That's why I asked you on this podcast.
All right.
You had the Integra last, and the Integra had AM on.
And how is it different than frequency modulated?
And so, well, I don't have time to get into all that, Greg. But I'm the guy that drives around and listens through all the static. EVs do create static on the AM radio, but hey, I'm going to listen to the Orioles game however I can get it. So I'm willing to deal with it. Does it need to be in every car? I would say probably no. Everyone has their phone with them at all times, which you can send alerts through that, which everyone does now, whether you want them or not sometimes. So I would be sad to see it go. Is it necessary? Probably not.
And what I will say about it is it's interesting because Ford started making some of their EVs like without it. Like they just did it. They just stopped.
A lot of the European cars we've been getting in for years, Volvo especially, they haven't had AM for years. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So Ford was like making production cars, specifically their EVs, and they did not have AM in them. But this, they were going to start doing that with gasoline powered cars in 2024. Right. So basically, Jim Farley said that if, now that there's this like bill that requires new cars to have AM radio in it, that they actually can do like an over-the-air update to enable it or something. Yeah. So I'm just very curious, like the engineering is obviously like beyond me, but I'm curious, like you can just, all right, like the tech is in there and you can just do an over-the-air update.
Either way, I don't think it's a hill to die on either side. Sure. I think that it should probably, if we can make a quick fix somehow, I'm not a genius, but I'm sure we can probably figure out a way around this. It sounds like the really only issue is that the motor is affecting the signal coming into the car from AM. Which effectively renders it useless if we're worried about the safety. But if you're in an EV and you can't hear the message anyway, what's the point of even having it? I think, we should probably figure it out. It doesn't seem to me that it's, a major engineering issue that we, the smartest generation that's ever lived, can't figure out. But you can put me firmly into let's keep AM radio in cars if at all possible camp. All right. Before we get to our viewer question, just want to take a second to thank our sponsors who we love. Lucas Oil, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, still our newest sponsor, and TireRack.com. That's a pretty easy to use site. Have you used that recently? Yeah.
Have I bought anything that's been a while? I go on there often and window shop.
Same.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of the internet, our question from a viewer this week comes from YouTube. Ever heard of it?
No.
It's from Steve. Did you pull this directly off? Was this directed at you, or how did you get this?
This was actually a comment on our Tacoma video.
Yeah.
The one
Tacoma
that Ryan Robinson did.
No, nobody said anything about you other than where's John Davis, but that was about it.
Well, Steve, let's hear your question. Why is it that with each new generation, and that's in quotations, of cars and trucks, there seems to be less car or truck for the money? So each new vehicle that comes out, we're getting less and spending more. Why is that? Is that an actual thing, or are we making it up?
Because I think it's very easy to think that when you don't think about like
inflation.
Things like inflation or like all of the new standard features on cars, right? Like all of the safety tech that's in them now that wasn't in them 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And probably it's also due to the fact that we have like really big gaps between like where a car starts and like how much it costs fully loaded. Because I actually have an example.
I love examples.
I love examples. So Alex talked about the tracks recently on a podcast, and we were talking about like how great it was that like it starts at like $21,000 and like pretty much fully loaded it's at like $26,000. But like something like a Jeep Grand Cherokee, their base Laredo model for a two-door starts about $40,000, and a two-door Summit Reserve, that's like a fully loaded mostly everything you can get starts at $68,000. So you're talking about a $30,000 difference. And then there's a very wide range in between, something that's like $55,000. So I think, maybe there's less value sometimes the further, the higher trim level that you can get, depending upon what you buy. But that, to me, that's my perspective of it.
Yeah, the more a vehicle sells, the more they tend to have the spread in price. Obviously they're not going to sell a whole lot of tracks, so they don't want to have a whole bunch of different variations out there. But something like the Cherokee, Grand Cherokee, they sell a ton of them. They got lots of different options for you. I wouldn't say that we get less for more money. I'd say we get more for a lot more money, more than we get less value maybe, but we get more for more money, just because everything's got to be safety constantly updated, more entertainment, infotainment things. You do always get more. Every vehicle is usually bigger than the one came before it. You do get more, you do maybe get less value.
Yeah, I mean, I think of course, there's probably always a certain element of greed to it. You can, that's just what it is. But I think, I know, shocker. But I think a lot of it,
just they're out to make money.
Just making money. I know, it's wild, it's crazy. But I mean, there's the obvious answer of inflation. We've talked about kind of like the hidden costs of things, the safety, the R&D that goes into these cars, the new tech. I mean, those are things that you may not see all the time, but of course they cost money. I mean,
manufacturing. We keep hearing like $2 billion being spent here for a new factory, $2 billion being spent here for a new factory. Yeah.
And the only other thing is there may be somewhat of an illusion or like the loss of choice. I mean, you look at back in the day, quote unquote, my dad always loves to talk about it. Like you look at a build sheet for, our 70 Mustang and it's like there's like a bajillion options. You can do all these crazy things, you get all these different colors and rear ends and this and that. And now it's like you look at like certain, like with mid-sized trucks, a lot of them are doing, 4-door. Crew cab or whatever, you get a short bed and that's it. So maybe some people feel like, man, I'm paying all that money for this truck, but I can only kind of configure it one or two ways. So
and I do wonder too if powertrain is also a big part of that perception too. It's like, well, I could have gotten a V8 for like cheaper 5 years ago, and now I got to get a V6 or a Turbo 4 or something like that. So that might also be part of that.
There you have it, Steve. You are not making it up that cars and trucks are getting more expensive, but we might disagree a little bit there on how much more and what you're getting for it. That takes us to the video where Steve actually left this comment. We did a first look at the 2024 Toyota Tacoma.
Almost live from Hawaii.
Almost.
It's pretty close to being live.
Brian literally sent the video up from Hawaii back to Owings Mills, Maryland. It was insane at this speed. So Brian, you were there. Tell us all about it and what you got to do with this Tacoma.
Yeah, all new Tacoma is coming out in 2024. We weren't able to drive it, but I was able to get about an hour's worth of time with 4 different versions: Limited, TRD Sport, TRD Pro, and a new one they have called the Trail Hunter, which is an interesting vehicle. But as far as the Tacoma itself, very similar in size to the current one, which I think is a good thing. They did make it a little bit wider to get a little more shoulder, elbow room, mainly in the front row. So it looks like a tougher version of the current Tacoma. They didn't make it look like the Tundra, thankfully, at least as far as I'm concerned. It sits literally, ground clearance is up literally 1/10 of an inch. So again, just tiny changes in size all around. Probably the biggest change is the bed walls are taller to allow. So according to them, with the tonneau cover on, people couldn't fit their Yeti coolers in under the. So that's everyone.
That's a major problem.
Correct.
Huge problem.
Right. So now, if you buy a Tacoma with a tonneau cover, you can fit your Yeti cooler in the bed.
Will they give you a Yeti cooler when you buy a Tacoma?
Not
should
enough.
Be a dealer incentive or something.
Who's Yeti's competitor? Can they make a cooler that was just a little bit smaller for people with current?
But anyway, speaking of beds, you get the 5 or the 6 foot. In the crew cab, new variation is an extra cab it's a 2-door with a little bit of extra space behind the front seats for storing gear. They didn't have one of those for us to look at. Don't really have any information on that. They didn't really get into details as far as the 4-wheel drive systems, rear axles, or anything like that. Powertrain news they did give us, and it's pretty significant. Now 4-cylinder only. So there's actually 4 different horsepower ratings. The base is 2.4 liter turbo, similar to the engine in the current Highlander. But 2 different horsepower ratings. You get a 228 horsepower rating or a 278 horsepower rating. Both of those come with an 8-speed automatic transmission. If you get the 6-speed manual, which yes is still available, you will get a 270 horsepower version. The big news is the hybrid system added to that 2.4 liter called the iForce Max. It's similar to the Hybrid Max that you can get in the Toyota Crown. With that engine, you get 326 horsepower, automatic transmission only, but 465 pound-feet of torque, which is 200 more than the current V6, which sounds like a lot.
They did give you towing numbers and payload?
Towing stays the same at 6,000 pounds. The Tacoma does ride on the Tundra's frame now, which is significant. And there's an all-new coil spring suspension on all models except for the base SR5 still gets leaf springs. So that's a big update.
I'm old enough now and have been with MotorWeek long enough to say I was on a previous generation launch, which was in 2015 for the 2016 model year for this Tacoma. And they brought out the new Tacoma then, and it still had drum brakes in the rear. And they told us, they're like, well, because a lot of people like to off-road our vehicles, so the drum brake is the best way to keep rocks from getting in between the pads and the rotor. So what's their tune now? Because I think they're gone to disc brakes.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get into that topic. That's very good. But yeah, I don't know if the base SR5 still has drums or is it all disc?
I think they all have discs.
I think they're all upgraded to disc, and then the big thing was the difference was the suspension, leaf spring, or coil spring.
In certain trims, I think it's certain brake packages, like maybe bigger rotors or pads.
I'm going to say that they were just kind of making stuff up when they told you that back in
We all got that impression too back then. But yeah, just had to bring that up.
Yeah, much like they would say, they're cheaper, which they are, if they would admit to that, or that they have less drag, so they get better fuel economy, which I guess is also true. But all in all, I think they did a great job with it. But you mentioned towing 6,000 pounds. It's on the Tundra's frame now. There's plenty of torque there. It could tow more, but it's a mid-sized truck. If you want to tow more than 6,000 pounds, you should probably be doing something a little bigger. Will it tow more? Probably, but
please
it's not a great idea.
Don't do it. We're not recommending anyone do that.
I'm seeing pictures of shocks on seats.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was a big part of the TRD Pro comes with these isolated front seats. Basically, if you ever driven like a big RV or like a commercial bus where you see the driver just like pogoing up and down.
Basically like air ride suspension.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're bouncing over rocks and stuff, you're kind of floating. Again, we didn't get a chance to try them out, but should be a cool feature.
And they're not active, but tunable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you can bypass them, I believe, if you don't want them.
Yeah. Jess, what'd you think? You were on the internet the entire time as this broke a little bit earlier than Toyota wanted it to.
It did, yeah. I mean, I think it looks great. I think one of the biggest things that bothered people, and it's because they were in a lot of the really good press photos that everyone was using, was the air dam at the bottom, which if you look at like the limited, obviously the TRD Pro doesn't have it, but like if you look at the limited and what was the blue one that they had there?
TRD Sport.
The TRD Sport. It had the air dam at the bottom, and the air dam is like very long. cuts the ground clearance like very significantly.
It's ridiculous looking.
But Toyota, I guess, did
take it
say
off.
that it's super easy to. There's like 9 bolts or something.
Yeah,
They're
I was
super
going to
easy to
shoot
take
that,
off.
but I didn't really have a time. But yeah, it's similar to, I think the GMC and Chevy ones have the same deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just a couple bolts. Yeah,
And
which everyone will take it off, but they got it there for fuel economy. That's what it's
Exactly.
for,
Yeah, and we obviously don't know fuel economy numbers or anything yet. So hopefully they are better than the previous generation. Obviously, with like new updated powertrains, at least a little bit better.
Yeah.
I know the Hybrid Max isn't meant for something like that, but overall, I think people are like really interested in it. I am curious to see like who will use this extra cab version of it with the 6-foot bed and the 2 doors. I mean, there's no seats in the back, so you can store stuff there, but it doesn't look like it's like super easy to access. Like if you would have like the 2 doors that would swing open. So I'm just kind of curious, like the use case of something like that for someone. But overall, and then there's a power tailgate as well, too.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't shoot, which I wish I didn't know at the time until they did the reveal the next night. So if the tailgate is down, and I don't know if other power tailgates do this because I never tried it. If the tailgate is down, all you have to do is kind of bump it with your leg, and it'll go up by itself. So if your hands are full with
your Yeti cooler.
All you have to do is then kind of bump the tailgate, and it'll close itself.
Now that sounds useful.
Yeah,
I like that.
Totally useful. Yeah.
I'm
have
not
to
sure
try
I've
that
ever
out.
tested one. I'm not saying others haven't done it, but I don't recall ever seeing it in a press release or ever doing it. I definitely have never done it myself.
Yeah.
That's a nice little feature.
Before we get off the topic, though, I don't know if you want to mention a little bit more about the Trail Hunter.
So the Trail
Briefly.
Hunter, it seems a little weird to me. It's an off-road version with a bunch of aftermarket people they've partnered with, like ARB, Old Man Emu, I think. So I think their TRD Pro stuff is pretty good, but for some reason they felt a need to partner.
So this is kind of
So-
like an AEV, like their version of like an AEV.
They call it an Overlander, right? And so in all the
Okay,
pictures, they got the. Weren't given details as what all is standard with it and what all is not. But the one they had there just had like some sail panels, a bunch of suspension stuff, but then all the pictures they have like the roof racks with the tent up top, of course, because everyone needs to camp in the desert off the ground. And but they didn't really give a whole lot of details on it, so they said stay tuned for more on that. To me, I don't know. I think their TRD Pro stuff is legit, and they should, obviously tout that. I'm not sure why. Why they would want to say if you really want to go overlanding, you need to turn to the aftermarket. So I don't know.
Maybe it's just their
more
way.
detail-
I think it's probably just their way of like delivering things straight from the factory.
Yeah,
because everyone seems to be wanting to do that more, even if they're using like aftermarket.
Yeah, I was
parts.
under the impression that Trail Hunter was going to be a thing that would be available on multiple vehicles, and the point was almost like an upfit package where certain things you can get from the factory, the dealer can install certain things. It's a lot of aftermarket support for it that, in theory, you can go to the dealer a lot once it arrives, and you can just pick it up and you're good to go. So that's the impression I was under. I don't know if that is still the case.
It's a good impression.
That's
Well,
one of the impressions of all time.
we got the Sequoia, we got the Tundra, we got the Tacoma, we got the new Prius. Everybody's waiting
Corolla
on that.
Cross.
Everybody's waiting on that
Grand
Forerunner, Grand Highlander.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like more legacy
Oh,
vehicles for Toyota, things that people are really waiting for.
Yeah.
So really the last one is the Forerunner, and I'm sure plenty of people were asking about that, and I'm sure Toyota said soon.
Yeah, they're working on it. It was cool. It was cool.
We are getting close, I will say that.
It was cool to hang out with the Tacoma engineers. Those guys, a lot of them have been working on Tacoma since the last gen. They are definitely truck guys. They're all showing you pictures of their rigs. I mean, if you're a Tacoma fan, rest assured those guys are doing the same thing with their trucks that you are, and they're, making them better.
I could have gone on a little mini rant there, but let's get into our actual mini
What was
rant
the
and
rant?
rave.
This is the rant and rave.
That's why I'm sending it over to Jessica, who we talked off air, and I think she's got one better than I could have ever given. So
Well, it's not a rant today. I do have a rave, and actually, Greg is part of this rave because Greg put this
I'm
together.
a part of every rave.
But this past week, we were very fortunate to be able to do some driver safety training at Summit Point. And Greg was pretty instrumental in like helping the instructors like figure out a really good curriculum.
You give
for
me
our
too much
usage.
credit. The credit really goes to the people over at Summit Point, Greg Haas and team. Yeah, they do this stuff all the time. They have driver training. Anybody can sign up and go and take these courses. And we told them that, we have a mixture of drivers. We have some people like myself, Brian, and other Brian and Dave who get a lot of track time. Then we have people like Jess and Alex who've had some track time but could always hone their skills. And we told them we need to cover a little bit of everything, basics up to essentially driving for camera. There was a little bit at the end there where everybody got to, you want to see those sliding shots, drifting around the corner. Is it the fastest way around the corner? No. But it looks the coolest. And they were able to accommodate us. So that was great. But back to you about how, what you got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was incredibly helpful just because like I said, I've had track experience. I've attended Roebling a couple times. I've been on track events. So I've driven on race courses. But it's always nice to have somebody like next to you, like correcting what you were doing wrong, because everything is happening so quickly. And there's just like a lot of concepts like to put together. It's like, all right, I know braking, I know turning, I know like steering, but like, all right, what does that all mean when I like go into a corner? And like, how do I take it in like the most efficient way possible and also the safest way possible? So it was just really nice to have like somebody like being there, being like, all right, yep, that was the way to do it. Okay, you could do this better next time. And then, we did some like slalom sort of stuff, which I hadn't really done. And we did some braking.
I've done enough for the both of us, so don't worry about that.
You and Brian, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good. Bad habits are just like life. Bad habits are something they're easy to sneak up on you, and you got to look out for them. So it's always great to get some training, have someone watch you drive and tell you what you could do better. One of the coolest things we did, which I'd never done at any driving school before, we drove the track we were on backwards, but we had to stay in one lane, simulating like driving on a unfamiliar road, driving it fast, and places where you could drive fast, driving it safely, where you have a good visibility, you can drive fast there. Where you got a corner coming up, take it easy until you know what's around the other side. It was a cool exercise.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to come back to, but Alex, I kind of want to hear what your opinion was of it.
Great experience. We were driving ex-cop Chargers, which was
which apparently were again another pandemic casualty. Were very hard to come by.
Yeah, I heard them talking about that.
They were able to turn the ABS off.
About to say they had the switch to turn all that off, so you got the full bore experience there. Got to do a lot of fun stuff. It was my first time on a skid pad personally, so
skid pad was fun.
That was a lot of fun. And then it's invaluable practice, even if you don't drive for camera or do track events. Like there's a lot that I think your average person could go and get something out of that, because at the end of the day, it's about going faster, but it's also about doing it safely.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be my point, is kind of advocating for driver training, not necessarily high performance driver training, because while we were focusing toward the end of the day more on high speed stuff, a lot of the morning portion was basically just low speed. Okay, what happens if your car starts to oversteer? What if it understeers? The whole thing with Brian, where we drove the track backward in one lane, mimicking a normal road where you weren't allowed to go into another lane.
Off-road recovery.
Off-road recovery, yeah. This is all stuff that everybody who drives a car should know. Everybody should know what it feels like to lose control at some point. And taking a driver training course, whether it's Summit Point or anywhere you do it, I think if I can advocate for something, I think everybody needs to do that, because if you do it on a closed course in a controlled environment, it's probably is going to happen to you at some point on the road. Hopefully it doesn't, but it probably will. And when it does, you won't panic. You'll know what it feels like, and you will hopefully know how to get out of that situation. So,
and my last thing, real quick, is, and the staff is very accommodating.
They were great.
They
so
are
great,
phenomenal.
yeah.
So if you have any nerves about going into it, like, oh, are they going to judge me? They're not. They want to see you get better.
And they deal with all types of training too.
Oh,
like
yeah.
they do training, I guess, for people who drive like armored cars and stuff like that.
Military training.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do all sorts of training. So it's like you don't need to be like skilled in driving. They want to help you to become a better driver. That's their entire goal, really.
Yeah.
So
the skid pad alone, honestly, right, guys?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
everybody should get on a skid pad.
I mean, just the fact, like, when you're on the skid pad and you're kind of like learning the difference between the front skid and the rear skid, and like how to deal with them, and because the front skid feels way different than the rear skid, and you also have to do completely different things to like mitigate getting out of them. But like once you get it, you're like, oh, okay, well that's easy. I don't need to panic. Like, because I know exactly what to do when I feel the steering wheel feel a certain type of way.
And they showed us, like, here's what's going to happen, like, if you do get in a spin. Like, we had to go through a spin, and it's like, here's how you stop it, you know?
Spins were crazy.
So skid pad's great, a little bit better than doing it in a snowy Walmart parking lot, but hey, I mean, that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
well, maybe you're listening to us in a snowy Walmart parking lot. Hopefully not, because we're recording this on May 25th, but you never know.
These things are timeless, Greg.
That does it for MotorWeek podcast number 305. I hope it wasn't too insufferable listening to my nasally voice. I'd like to thank my children for that. They're just little booger factories, but I do love them. We would like to thank our audio engineer, Austin Harris, who's been with us for quite a few podcasts now. Doing a great job. Thank you, Austin. Podcast producer, who's with us right now, Jessica Ray. Thank you, Jessica. And podcast creator, Bob Mixter. He's somewhere in this building.
He's with us in spirit.
He's always with us.
Always.
He's with me in spirit all the time. Just a reminder, you can catch MotorWeek on your local PBS channel, MAV TV cable channel. If you need to find us, go to our new website. Jessica, have we plugged this yet? We
haven't
literally have a
plugged
brand
it
new.
yet, but
Well,
yeah,
we
and
did
this is
a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago. Wait a
we might have teased it like ages ago.
Give us a real quick rundown.
Okay, yeah. So, new website. I've been working on it for probably about 2 years.
Literally,
It's like
not
it's a
exaggerating.
very long process. Obviously, because we have a pretty like complicated web. I shouldn't say it that way. We have a very expansive website.
Information intensive.
Tons of information. So it took a little bit to find all of our like perfect new ways to do things. So I'm really excited. It's streamlined in a way that I hope all the information is very easily accessible.
Search function is much more functional.
Oh my
much more searchable.
gosh!
Yeah.
Yes,
I love that.
Yes, we have an excellent search function.
Image galleries. We can post more than like 3 pictures.
Yeah, we've got some great image galleries. A lot more information now on the site.
Don't give it all away. Let's let people
Find out
go.
for yourself.
Sorry.
Make sure you go over to motorweek.org and check out our brand new website. Or you could go over to YouTube. We have thousands of videos over there uploading every week. Basically, if you have a screen, as John Davis likes to say, you can find us. Thanks for listening to us talk about cars. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I really enjoyed talking about cars. We'll do it again soon on the next MotorWeek podcast.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.